Welcome to the 5th chapter of the book of 1 Samuel. Now, the Ark of the Covenant has been taken. Eli's 2 sons have perished in the war, and Eli fell over backwards, broke his back, and died. Now, how old Samuel was, I'm not really sure. I suppose you could sit there and look at genealogies and figure it out, maybe not. But this young man, I don't think he was an old man, because Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, he grew up with them in the tabernacle. But it goes now and changes into, leaves the Israelites, goes in to with the Philistines and the ark, and what happens. And it begins, and the Philistines took the ark of God. And they carried it from out of Ebenezer, where the Israelites were camped, unto Ashdod. This was in Philistia. Jerusalem's over here, and Ashdod is over here. So the battle was in between. And the Philistines took the ark of God, and carried it into the house of Dagon, as we call it. Dagon was mentioned earlier in Judges 16:23, where it says, "And the rulers of the Philistines came together to sacrifice a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to be merry." And this was in reference to where Samson was in the building, the structure where all these Philistines were, and where he pulled them down after he was blinded, pulled it down and collapsed, and all these Philistines died. And then later, Dagon is mentioned in 1 Chronicles 10:1, where it says, "And they put that is Saul's weapons in the house of their God, after Saul and Jonathan were killed by the Philistines. And his head they pinned in the house of Dagon," put it on the stake of some sort in the house of Dagon. Dagon, it says later that it was masculine and has a face. He has a place where he stays, the temple, and it had a head, wrists, and hands, and a spine. Some pictures, if you went on to Wikipedia, showed him almost like a merman, like the opposite of a mermaid, where the top torso and head are of a human and the bottom of a fish. Now, whether or not that was actually the case, or someone has come up with that somehow, I don't know. I didn't study it, but I saw it in Wikipedia. But what the Bible basically does say are the things I just mentioned: is masculine, has a face, has a head, wrists, hands, and a spine. And the Ashdodites rose early and entered into the house of Dagon the next day. And they saw, and behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face upon the ground before the ark of God. So there's his face, head. And they raised Dagon and placed him upon his place. And it came to pass, as they rose early in the next day in the morning, and behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face before the ark of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both the traces, and that is the palms, of his hands were removed unto the front of the doorpost. So he has these. And both the wrists of his hands were fallen upon the threshold. Only the spine of Dagon was left behind. So somehow it fell over. The hands were on the door threshold. On account of this, the priests of Dagon do not mount, nor do any enter into the house of Dagon upon the threshold, but upon the threshold of the house of Dagon in Ashdod until this day. But by passing over, they pass over it. So they walk over the threshold. And the hand of the Lord was oppressive against the Ashdodites, and he tormented the Ashdodites and struck them in their buttocks, in Ashdod and their borders. So that whole area, they were struck in the buttocks. Now, this is basically a plague. And the plagues are interesting. The plagues that I know of that are fairly well known that relate to this type of plague would be the plagues in Egypt. Plague is, the word is actually thanatos, which means death. But whenever they're struck by something other than actually the dying, which you would see in the context of that verse or in that situation, then it would be called a plague if it had to do with animals or anything of nature. The first plagues that I can think of were the plagues in Egypt. And it says in Exodus 9:9, and there will be upon men and upon the four-footed creatures sores of boils breaking out among both men and among the four-footed creatures, even in all the land of Egypt. So that was a plague that struck the Egyptians, basically, and their animals. Another famous plague was when King David decided to take a census that wasn't approved by God, and that's in 2 Samuel 24:13, where it reads, and God went to David and announced and said to him, choose to yourself what is to be to you, 3 years of famine in your land, or 3 years for you to flee before your enemies, and they will be pursuing you, and 3 days of thanatos, plague, in your land. So that was the next plague that was in the Bible. Now today, this is March the 30th, second last day of March 2020. A plague has gone through the world. Pretty much everything has shut down. It's called the coronavirus. And where I live, basically everything is shut down. There's no restaurants open. No gas stations may be open, a few big stores, no restaurants, or you can't get a haircut. I don't know how long it's going to be. They're talking about a month. And my hair is going to start getting long, and so I don't know what I'm going to do. Nails, I can't. I have a bad hip, so I have to go to have somebody trim my left toenails, and they're not open. So it's a time of this plague going through. Now, other places in the world outside of the United States have suffered greatly. China and Italy, Iran. And they're talking about many more dying, but we'll see whether or not that's the case. They have even shut down the churches. Churches, people can't go to church. Today, a pastor of a church in Florida, was arrested because he had the people come and have a church service, and the authorities came and arrested him and took him to jail. It was a kind of an interesting thing because he was saying, well, certain stores are open all the time, like Walmart and so forth, and people go there way more than they would go once a week to a church service. So why don't you try, if you're really serious about it, why don't you shut down these big stores? Well, that's the argument. But the other argument is that the police are giving the orders, and the New Testament's pretty specific about obeying authorities. And if a road was closed going to a church, and there was a drop-off of landslide, and it was right around the curb, and if you went around the curb, you'd fall off and die, and the police were there, and they said you couldn't go to the church, and you went ahead, well, you should stop, and if there's an emergency. Now, so far, it's only been a week or so, so to me, it's an emergency. But if it continues for a long period of time, then it could turn into some other thing rather than an emergency. Could turn into something where, for some reason, they want to close the churches. But they can't close God from communicating with people. We all have Bibles, hopefully you do, or internet, and people watching these video seminars going through the Bible are able to read the Bible and communicate with God. So I look at it as basically a choice of either obeying the police or revolting and causing problems. And I just don't see the second as being viable yet. Horrible, hopefully not, ever. And it continues then in verse 7. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one more, I forgot. One more biblical mention of the plague, and that's in Revelation 2:23 in the future. And it says, I will kill her, that is the people in Thyatira, children by plague, and they shall know in all the assemblies that I am the one searching the kidneys and hearts. So Revelation 2:23. So he's going to kill ones in Church of Thyatira in their assemblies. So is he going to hear? Is he pouring out his wrath on the United States? I don't know. But in the future, this is what's mentioned. And then later in Revelation 6:8, it says, and was given to him, and that him is the one riding on the pale horse. Given to him authority upon the fourth of all the earth to kill by broadsword, by hunger, and by plague, and by wild beasts of the earth. So there will be a terrible plague in the end times, time of the beast. And I hope I won't be around, because right now we get a sign of what it could be. And I somehow think that this is just a trial run for the beast to see what he can do. And he's shut down the world, and Satan is in control of the world. God has given him the control of the world. Basically, Satan offered the world everything that Jesus could see when he was in the wilderness being tempted or tested by Satan. Satan said that he had all this, and Jesus didn't argue with him and say, no, you don't, because he did. And he, I believe, is in charge of the plague that's going on right now. The coronavirus could be a trial run for later to see how it's all going to come about and bring it about. Looks like it would be fairly easy to do, because people are basically right now afraid of what's called the coronavirus. And it's basically a cold. And the colds are been common for forever. I've had colds, and some years many people have died from a virus cold, rhinovirus. That was even called coronavirus over a year ago, well before this period of time came here in early 2020. And so people just got sick, and some older people and weak people or whatever passed away. And in 2017 in the United States, 80,000 people were killed by the flu, the sickness, the cold. And yet today in the United States, just right now, is about 2,000 people have died. End of March, beginning of April. Some people say there's going to be a couple 100,000 that will die. That's the, not the plan, but the forecast. But I don't know. What do I know? But the coronavirus, to me, it's not that bad compared to what we've suffered before. And I've suffered, and a couple of years ago in 2017, I got really sick twice, came back and bounced back on me. So much so that I said last year, I'm going to stay inside for a couple of months, not be around people. And I did, and I didn't get sick, didn't catch a cold. So now I'm in quarantine, basically. But I'm having a great time. I don't think I'll get sick. I have all the food I need. Everything's in my pantry and my refrigerator and so forth. And the Lord has me going and starting on the third edition today. And I've just done the first 10 chapters of Matthew, spent all day doing it and loved it. I'm like, oh, this is just wonderful, Lord. I mean, this is better than anything, just to be able to study the Word like I do and get it ready and for you to see the third edition in maybe a year. So the plague we have today is nothing compared to what the beast will have in store for the world, and hopefully we, the Christians, won't be around but taken out. So they said, for his hand is hard against us. And they spoke, saying that the ark of the God of Israel shall not settle with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. And they send and gather the satraps, and you can add that to your English derivatives book. It's not in the New Testament. Transliteration, satraps, of the Philistines to themselves. They all got together, and they say, what should we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And the Gathites say, well, let the ark of God pass between the ranks, the soldiers, to us. And so that Gath, I imagine, is this Gath over here. I'm not sure, but it doesn't have a Gath on there for some reason. And it came to pass, after it being passed through the ranks of the soldiers, that the hand of the Lord came against the city of Gath, a exceedingly great disturbance. And he struck the men of the city from small unto megalu, micro, small unto megalu, mega, in their buttocks. Some type of a boil, I suppose, maybe hemorrhoids. And they sent out the ark of God unto Ekron. Ekron is also on this map. It's up here. And so now it's gone, they're going to send it to Ekron. And that the Ekronites yelled out, saying, why do you return the ark of the God of Israel to us? Is it to put us to death and our people? And they sent and brought together all the satraps of the Philistines. And they said, send out the ark of the God of Israel, and let it sit in its place, so that in no way shall we be put to death, us and our people. Let it go back to where it belongs. For there came to pass a confusion of death in the entire city, or plague, and exceedingly severe, as the ark of the God of Israel entered. And the living and the dying were struck in the buttocks, and the cry of the city unto heaven ascended unto the heaven. So the people there are suffering physically with that plague. And so we'll find out now what happens to these people, how they alleviate the problem. In chapter 6, I'm laughing because it's a good story. And I hope you'll join us in chapter 6 with this story of the ark and its return. Until then, God bless.